There is a question that haunted Sigmund Freud throughout his entire career, a question that he kept returning to, examining from different angles, never quite satisfied with his own answers. The question is deceptively simple, but the answer is brutally complex. Why do people refuse to wake up? Why do they remain unconscious? Why do they insist on living their lives in a state of delusion, denial, and fundamental self-deception? And perhaps most importantly, what function does this sleep serve? Why is it so difficult to wake up that most people never do? The conventional narrative is that people want to wake up. They want to know the truth. They want to understand themselves. They want to grow and evolve and become conscious. But Freud knew something that modern self-help culture refuses to acknowledge. This is a lie. People don't want to wake up. They're terrified of waking up, and the unconscious mind has developed elaborate mechanisms to keep them asleep. Let's start with the most brutal truth that Freud articulated. The unconscious mind is not interested in truth. It's not interested in your growth. It's not interested in your happiness or your fulfillment or your potential. The unconscious mind is interested in one thing: survival. It's interested in maintaining homeostasis. It's interested in keeping you alive and keeping you functioning, even if that means keeping you asleep. Think about what happens in the first years of your life. You're born completely dependent and vulnerable. Your parents are gods. They control everything. They provide food, shelter, safety, love. They also provide the first interpretations of reality. They tell you who you are. They tell you what's possible. They tell you what's acceptable and what's shameful. They tell you what you should desire and what you should fear. And most importantly, they teach you which parts of yourself are lovable and which parts must be hidden. This is not done through explicit instruction. It's done through the thousand small moments of approval and disapproval, acceptance and rejection, interest and dismissal that comprise daily life. The child learns what gets rewarded and what gets punished, what gets attention and what gets ignored, what gets love and what gets abandonment. And here's the brutal part. The child learns very quickly that some parts of themselves are incompatible with being loved. If you're an aggressive child and your parents reward compliance and gentleness, you learn that your aggression is unlovable. If you're a sensitive child and your parents reward strength and stoicism, you learn that your sensitivity is unlovable. If you're a sexual child and your parents are repressed, you learn that your sexuality is unlovable. If you're a curious child and your parents value obedience, you learn that your curiosity is unlovable. So what does the child do? The child does what any organism does when faced with the threat of abandonment. It survives. It suppresses the unlovable parts. It learns to perform the lovable parts. It develops a false self that is designed to secure the love and approval it needs to survive. But here's the thing. This false self becomes so entrenched, so deeply wired into the nervous system, so thoroughly integrated into the sense of identity, that by adulthood, the person no longer knows that it's false. They think the false self is who they really are. They've been asleep so long that they don't remember waking. Now, Freud understood that this sleep is actually functional. It's adaptive. It served you well as a child. By suppressing your authentic self and performing a false self designed to secure love and safety, you survived. You got the approval you needed. You avoided abandonment. The sleep protected you. But here's where it gets complicated. As an adult, the sleep no longer serves you. But the mechanisms that keep you asleep are still operating. They're still trying to protect you from the abandonment that threatened you as a child. They're still trying to secure the love and approval that you learned you needed to survive. They're still suppressing the authentic parts of yourself that you learned were unlovable. So you remain asleep. You perform the false self. You seek approval and validation and love in ways that are directly connected to the particular form of abandonment you feared as a child. You create relationships that recreate the original family dynamics. You choose careers that allow you to perform the self that was rewarded. You develop hobbies and beliefs and values that all support the false identity. And most importantly, you develop a powerful resistance to anything that threatens this sleep. You develop what Freud called defense mechanisms. These are psychological strategies that protect you from becoming conscious of anything that would destabilize your identity. They keep you asleep by keeping the truth out of consciousness. There are many different defense mechanisms. Repression is the most fundamental one. Repression is simply the refusal to remember. You literally don't allow memories of the original abandonment or rejection to enter consciousness. They're stored in the body. They affect your behavior, but you don't consciously remember them. You don't consciously know why you react the way you do to certain situations. You just know that you do. Then there's projection. You take the parts of yourself that you cannot acknowledge and you see them in others. You judge others harshly for the very things you cannot see in yourself. The person who is ashamed of their sexuality is often the most judgmental of others' sexuality. The person who is afraid of their own aggression is often afraid of aggression in others. The person who cannot acknowledge their need for connection is often contemptuous of others' neediness. Through projection, you get to feel righteous and superior while remaining completely unconscious of your own disowned parts. Then there's rationalization. You come up with rational-sounding reasons for your behaviors that have nothing to do with the actual unconscious motivations. You stay in a relationship because you love your partner, when the real reason is that you're terrified of being alone. You stay in a job because you find it meaningful, when the real reason is that it confirms your identity. You practice spirituality because you're genuinely seeking truth, when the real reason is that it makes you feel superior and special. Then there's sublimation. You channel your unconscious drives into socially acceptable outlets. Your aggressive drive becomes competitive sports. Your sexual drive becomes romantic love. Your need for power becomes professional achievement. Your desire for connection becomes community service. Through sublimation, you get to satisfy your unconscious drives without having to acknowledge them consciously. And then there's perhaps the most insidious defense mechanism, the creation of meaning. You take the arbitrary nature of your life, the fact that you're performing a false self to secure love that you never actually received in the way you needed, and you create a narrative that makes it all make sense. You say that your suffering is noble, you say that your sacrifice is meaningful, you say that your performance is authentic. You create a story about your life that justifies everything and keeps you from seeing the truth. These defense mechanisms don't operate consciously. You're not deliberately choosing to repress or project or rationalize. These mechanisms operate automatically at an unconscious level. They're built into your nervous system. They're as automatic as breathing. They protect you from becoming conscious of anything that would threaten your identity. And here's where Freud's brutality becomes really clear. These mechanisms work. They really do. They keep you asleep. They keep you functioning. They allow you to go through life without ever having to face the fundamental lie at the heart of your existence, which is that you're performing a false self in a desperate attempt to secure love that was never going to come, because the love you needed would have required your parents to be different than they were. Most people never wake up because waking up means giving up these defense mechanisms. Waking up means allowing yourself to remember what you've repressed. It means seeing in yourself what you've been projecting onto others. It means understanding the actual unconscious motivations beneath your rational explanations. It means recognizing that the meaning you've created is a defense mechanism, not a truth. Waking up means confronting the fundamental wound that established your entire defensive structure. It means feeling the abandonment, the rejection, the shame that you've spent your entire life running from. It means letting the false self die so that something more authentic might emerge. And this is why most people never do it. Because waking up means passing through hell. It means experiencing pain that you've been defended against your entire life. It means facing the reality that your life has been built on a foundation of illusion. It means accepting that the people you love most have wounded you in ways you're only now beginning to understand. It means giving up the identity you've constructed and the meaning you've created and the defenses that have kept you safe. Freud understood that this is not a comfortable process. He understood that the ego will mount fierce resistance to this awakening. The ego will do anything to protect the sleep. It will create new defense mechanisms. It will find new ways to distract itself. It will reframe the attempt to wake up as dangerous or unnecessary or self-indulgent. Think about what happens when someone begins to wake up. When someone starts to question the narratives they've been telling themselves, when someone begins to feel the emotions they've been defending against, the immediate response, from both the individual and often from the people around them, is alarm. You're having a breakdown. You're being selfish. You're being ungrateful. You're being destructive. You're ruining your life. You're losing perspective. You need to get back to normal. You need to stop this nonsense and get back to your defenses, because the sleep doesn't just protect the individual, the sleep protects the entire system. The family depends on you playing your role. The job depends on you performing your function. The society depends on you remaining unconscious. Conscious people are unpredictable. They don't fit into systems. They question authority. They refuse to perform. They want authenticity instead of efficiency. So there's a collective conspiracy to keep you asleep. Your family wants you asleep because it means the family system remains stable. Your employer wants you asleep because it means you remain a reliable worker. Your culture wants you asleep because it means you consume what you're told to consume and believe what you're told to believe. Even your friends and intimate partners often want you asleep because your sleep validates their sleep. This is perhaps the most brutal insight that Freud articulated. You are kept asleep not just by your own defense mechanisms, but by the entire structure of society. Consciousness is dangerous to the system. The system requires sleep. It requires people to remain unconscious of their own motivations, their own wounds, their own capacity for authentic choice. Now, Freud was not naive. He understood that most people would never wake up. He understood that the resistance to consciousness is too great. He understood that the defenses are too powerful. He understood that the rewards of sleep, the approval, the belonging, the safety, the meaning, are too compelling to give up. So what did he offer? He offered the possibility. He said that through analysis, through a sustained engagement with the unconscious, through a relationship with someone trained to recognize the defense mechanisms, it's possible to wake up. Not completely, not permanently. Consciousness is not a state you reach and then remain in. It's an ongoing process. You wake up, and then you fall back asleep, and then you wake up again. The dream is always trying to pull you back in. But it's possible. It's possible to become more conscious, more aware of your defense mechanisms, more aware of your projections, more aware of the gap between your rational narratives and your actual motivations, more aware of the false self you've been performing, more aware of the authentic self that has been waiting beneath the sleep. And once you achieve this awareness, once you've really seen yourself, you can make different choices. You can choose differently in your relationships because you understand the old patterns. You can choose differently in your work because you're not seeking validation for an identity that was built on a childhood wound. You can choose differently in your beliefs and values because they're coming from authentic preference rather than defensive position. You can choose to be more yourself. But here's the thing. Freud understood that most people wouldn't choose this. Most people would choose the sleep. Because the sleep, while painful in the ways it limits you, is familiar. It's safe. It makes sense. It connects you to the people you love. It gives you meaning and purpose and identity. The awakening is uncomfortable. It requires you to sit with contradictions and uncertainties. It requires you to accept that much of your life has been built on illusion. It requires you to grieve the loss of the false self. It requires you to tolerate the anxiety of authenticity. It requires you to make choices based on who you actually are rather than who you've been trained to be. So most people choose the sleep, and this is not a moral failure. This is not weakness. This is the most natural human response. The defenses were set up because you needed them. They've kept you safe. They've allowed you to function. They've allowed you to get the love and approval and belonging you needed to survive. Why would you give that up? Freud's brutal explanation is simply this. Most people never wake up because waking up is too costly. The cost is too high. The loss is too great. The anxiety is too much. The grief is too deep. The abandonment of the false self is too terrifying. So they remain asleep. They perform. They defend. They rationalize. They create meaning. They live out the script that was written for them in childhood. They remain unconscious. And in Freud's dark vision, this is not a problem to be solved. This is not something that needs to be fixed. This is simply how humans are. This is the human condition. We are creatures who are born, dependent, and vulnerable. We learn early on to perform rather than be authentic. We develop elaborate defense mechanisms to protect us from pain. We create meaning that justifies our suffering. And most of us never wake up from this sleep. The few who do wake up, who go through the hard work of becoming conscious, who face their wounds, who dismantle their defenses, who grieve their false selves, who accept the anxiety of authenticity, these people are the exceptions. They're not happier necessarily. They're not more successful. They're not more loved, but they're more alive. They're more themselves. They're less driven by unconscious patterns. They have more capacity for choice. They experience more genuine connection because they're not performing. They experience more meaning because their meaning is self-created rather than defensive. But Freud was clear. This is not the path for most people. Most people will choose the sleep. They will maintain their defenses. They will perform their false selves. They will create narratives that justify their suffering. They will remain unconscious. And if this sounds bleak, it's because it is bleak. Freud was not an optimist. He was not interested in making people feel better. He was interested in telling the truth about the human condition. And the truth is that most people never wake up. The question is, what about you? Are you willing to wake up? Are you willing to face your own defenses? Are you willing to feel the pain you've been avoiding? Are you willing to let the false self die? Are you willing to tolerate the anxiety of authenticity? Are you willing to accept the grief that comes with seeing your life clearly? Because waking up is a choice. It's not something that happens to you. It's something you have to choose. You have to be willing to do the work. You have to be willing to sit with the discomfort. You have to be willing to question the narratives. You have to be willing to face the unconscious motivations beneath your behaviors. You have to be willing to see yourself clearly without the filters of defense mechanisms. Most people are not willing. Most people will not choose this. Most people will continue to sleep. They will continue to perform. They will continue to defend. They will continue to rationalize. They will continue to create meaning that justifies their suffering. But the possibility exists. The possibility of waking up is always there. The question is whether you have the courage to pursue it, whether you're willing to do the hard work, whether you're willing to face the brutal truth about yourself and your life, whether you're willing to become conscious. This is Freud's brutal explanation for why most people never wake up, not because they can't, but because they won't, because the sleep serves them, because the defenses protect them, because the false self, while inauthentic, is preferable to the terror of authentic being, because most people would rather remain asleep than face the truth about themselves. The question now is, are you one of the rare exceptions, or are you willing to be?